later if they can't make it tonight. So recording is on. So Carl,
Yeah, well, since we're not actually holding an actual meeting, because of people that aren't here, but I think we'll start off real fast, introduce the members of the Strategic Planning Committee. I'm Carl Richardson. I'm one of your trustees. I normally ask people not to throw anything at me until after the meeting. But I'm one of your trustees. I'm also part of the civic or the Strategic Planning Committee.
I'm Steve Eisenbrown. I'm the resident member on the Strategic Planning Committee.
No.
I'm Molly Snodgrass. I'm also another resident that's on the Strategic Planning Committee. And I manage most of the communications. So if you got an email about this meeting, that was from me. And I also shared that on the Big Walnut Community Facebook page. So you may have also seen it there rather than an email. That's me.
I'm Tom Need. I'm the representative from the Township Commission.
Mike Cannon, I'm the Director of Zoning and Development.
I'd like to also thank everybody for being here. Thank you for all being here. Welcome to the meeting. We have a guest speaker tonight, Dale. He's with the who is he with? Director of the Energy Development, Ohio Farm Bureau. He's gonna have some good information for us, some things that about everybody knows the AEP lines. Just to fill us in on additional information. As you probably heard, if everybody could hold their questions until after Dale's done with his presentation, we'll make sure we answer as many questions as we can, and we'll go back over whatever. So at that point, Dale, I'm gonna turn it over to you, sir.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to be here. Yes, my name is Dale Arnold. I'm Director of Energy Services with the Ohio Farm Bureau. I've been with the Ohio Farm Bureau for 40 years. The vast majority of that time in the position I'm at right now with regard to public policy. Also, too, since we're talking about planning, I also represent farmers and rural residents on the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. I am the most recent retired chairperson of the Energy and Air Quality Working Group. I now serve as its vice chairman and will do so for some time. And so I've worked with regional planning organizations across the state. And I also believe Delaware County as well as Harlem Township as their governments are also members of MORPC, which is great. And so I understand and appreciate what you're doing. Let's take a look at this. I'm going to tell you this. I don't want you to drink from a fire hose. This is the start of a conversation. And my focus is to continue this conversation. You have my contact information there, my phone and my email address. You have any questions whatsoever in this process, please contact me and give me a call and let's continue the conversation. Because there's a number of things happening with regard to that, a number of things all over the place. And I do travel all over the state. I'm helping a number of local township and county governments address a number of issues with regard to transmission lines, pipelines, oil and gas drilling, road use maintenance agreements, and also what you're seeing with regard to wind and solar and other types of power generation. I also help farmers and rural residents in our member organization, Farm Bureau. Whenever a member has a question, an issue, or concern of anything energy related, leases and easements for power generation and transmission infrastructure, utility billing, on-site generation, a number of those things, I'm the person basically who does that for them. Let's start with this slide right here. Literally, I want you to think about this. What you are learning right now and what experience you gain in working with AEP transmission on this power line issue is going to serve you extremely well because there's a number of things, energy generation, transmission, and distribution systems. We are in a tremendous stage of refit. As a matter of fact, when you're talking about the refitting and bringing on new technologies and systems online, this has become much more complex, much more active than when these projects first came online at the beginning of the 20th century. You're working with power transmission right now or electric transmission. You'll soon be working with regard to power generation. It could be natural gas fired turbine generation. It could be like Flint Storage within about 15-minute drive of you that it's an energy storage facility, 50 megawatts or larger. You're going to be taking a look at pipeline development. As a matter of fact, Columbia Gas of Ohio already has a pipeline permit being considered in your particular area. You're going to be seeing other things with regard to solar, especially both on site as well as utility scale with Harvey, just next door to you in Licking County. You could see biomass, a number of things there. And consequently, you are going to be asked as local government officials and community stakeholders to be involved in the planning and the siting of those processes. Again, what you learn working with one energy development process, in this case, a transmission line system, is going to serve you extremely well, because within the next decade, you are going to see 3 or 4 other types of energy generation, transmission, and distribution systems coming to your particular corner of Delaware County. I'm showing you this slide. I want you to think about this. This is local electricity. Local electricity is not just your corner of Delaware County. It's not even central Ohio. It's basically a 14-state network. This is a map of what is called PJM Interconnection LLC. PJM stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland Interconnection Network. The reason it has its name is that this is where this network of generation assets, power plants, and transmission lines were first established at the beginning of the 20th century. PJM has expanded. It's now considered one of the world's largest electric market and electric generation and delivery systems. It is a 14-state network from as far south and east as the Carolinas, as far north and west as Chicago. And all of our utilities, investor-owned like AEP and First Energy, cooperatives like Consolidated or the Energy Cooperative in Licking County, as well as municipals, all belong to this particular system. And consequently, when you're talking about electricity, which is being used for you right now, it could come from a number of different generation sources: natural gas fired turbine generation, coal, nuclear, wind, solar. It can come from anywhere in this 14-state system through delivery, trade arbitrage. Electric is a commodity. It's bought and sold, and its price is determined with regard to supply and demand over time. And so this is a system that your electric utility participates in for acquiring and buying power generation contracts, making sure it's being transported or delivered to central delivery points and into your local distribution circuits for basically things to use. And you're hearing a lot about the upgrades and different things with regard to that as we speak. I also need to tell you this because there's some complexities in this system. Right now, the generation project you're talking about is 136 kilovolts in size. The Ohio Power Siting Boards, which I'll talk about in a minute, its jurisdictional authority starts when a transmission project is 100 kilovolts or larger. However, you have a number of other systems, 36 and 64 kilovolt lines, which can also be installed. And there's over 300 miles of those particular lines throughout many areas of rural and suburban Ohio. Those do not come under the Ohio Power Siting Board. However, they come under local jurisdiction. Could you be involved with that as a township trustee or a county? The answer is yes, because with power generation, with House Bill 510 being passed in December, you already are with wind and solar projects. The courts, the evaluation system is different. Being able to work with your county prosecutor, being able to advocate your position, negotiate, doing a number of things, it's rather different, it's rather new, and a number of people will need to understand, appreciate that. The reason I'm showing you this line, I'm actually working with some folks. You need to take a look at where you're at in the refit for a generation project. Some lines are 100 kilovolts or larger. They come under the Ohio Power Siting Board jurisdiction. Some are smaller, and the question becomes, who's got jurisdiction onto this? Who do I talk to and negotiate with? Understanding and appreciating what's going on is going to be different from this particular point forward. Let's talk about the Ohio Power Siting Board. I want you to think about this. When it comes to power siting, when it comes to transmission lines, 100 kilovolts and above, and that is basically the lines going through your area reach that jurisdictional authority. The authority is the Ohio Power Siting Board. It's been in existence since 1963. And I want you to think about this. Power siting in the state of Ohio is a adjudicatorial, or what I would call a judicial process. I want you to think about it as a court of law. It's different than what you're seeing in Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Pennsylvania, where you might have several different authorities all going through several different processes at the same time with hearings and different things to bring a project into fruition or to reject the project in some way, shape, or form. In Ohio, the Ohio Power Siting Board since 1963 is that judicial authority. It's that part of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio that has the authority basically to do that. When you're talking about the project in your area in question, it is going to be a case. It's going to be delivered a docket number. Everything is going to be a matter of public record. It's going to be readily accessible through the Ohio Power Siting Board. Your township trustees and county commissioners will be served copies of the official application. It'll be open for public examination, not only on the internet or with the Power Siting Board website, but also hard copies in your local public libraries in the area where that project is being considered. So all folks have the ability to do that. You'll have 2 administrative law judges that literally have the power as a judge, which means you will address them as your honor at local public hearings, who will take a look at and administer that case. As a local governing authority, your township trustees, your county commissioners have automatic right of what is called intervention. They can become a party of record in case proceedings. They can work with their county prosecutor or other legal counsel to represent their constituents in this particular proceeding. They'll be able to examine all evidence. They'll be able to do examination, cross-examination. They'll be able to participate in judicial proceedings near the end of the process. They'll be able to do a number of things. Anything you can do in a local court of law in a proceeding is entailed in this power siting process, and those parties of record can participate in those. As a local planning commission, you also have the opportunity as an organization, and also citizens groups, individual citizens have the right to also file a motion for intervention and become a party of record in those proceedings and be involved in this judicial process as things go forward. You might want to think about that as you're seeing cases and permits for generation, transmission, distribution projects basically being considered for your area. What are the provisions? What are the standards? What are the things basically the Power Siting Board need to take a look at and are detailed in the Ohio Administrative Code, where they will examine, see that these apply, show proof of application and they are applying, or reject an application because there's a shortcoming and a failure basically to meet a particular standard. These are the standards they need to think about. One is basis of need. This is a transmission facility. It's a transmission infrastructure project. It's a power line. They need to show that this particular project and facility is needed within the local area. Nature of probable environmental impact. They need to consider the available technology being considered, the economics of various other alternatives which might be able to do the same job, and other considerations in that particular area. They need to argue and show that particular point to the Power Siting Board and also parties of record in case proceedings. Is the facility consistent with regional energy plans? How is this going to be important for energy development in Central Ohio, Delaware County, Harlan Township? They have to be able to show that. What basically are going to be the benefits to our local community, short, medium, and long term? They need to show that also. Does the facility comply with economic, environmental, transportation, archaeological, and socioeconomic considerations, including aesthetics? Can this be basically installed? Can it fit? Can it be basically part of this particular community without making a dramatic impact? People will be discussing that, and that's a very important part of this application process. Does this facility serve in public interest, convenience, and necessity? Is it beneficial for the township, the county, the state of Ohio, and the other states in the PJM interconnection network all simultaneously? Being able to understand, appreciate, and show that is also part of this particular discussion. Impact and viability of agricultural land. Yes, a lot of these projects go on open rural area. Much of that is farm ground. Will it be protected? Will soil and water resources be saved and conserved? Will you take a look at grading? Will you take a look at repairs? Those things basically. And does this facility also maximize feasible water conservation practices? For coal and hydroelectric, that's huge, but it's also huge when you're taking a look at conservation, erosion control, and other factors on transportation projects. Those are the factors that the Power Siting Board needs to think about, look at, and have information and evidence showing that all of these apply before they will consider approving a project or not. And you have the ability to examine, you have the ability to refute, you have the ability to concur, you have the ability to negotiate along all of these particular lines. Here's some local power siting history. The project we're talking about is the AEP Vassal Green Chapel Transmission Enhancement Project. It has not been filed yet with the Ohio Power Siting Board. Technically, and I've said this to some folks, until this project is filed with the Ohio Power Siting Board, it doesn't exist. Now, yes, our friends and neighbors have been impacted with regard to a number of folks talking to them about easements. There's been open public and open house meetings regarding this. Routes are being discussed over a 2 or 3 township area. Is that all etched in stone? The answer is no, it's not. Nothing becomes etched in stone. Nothing becomes really definite until an application is received by the Ohio Power Siting Board, assigned a docket number, and starts the evaluation process. Does that mean you shouldn't talk to AEP Power Transmission or their field agents at this time? The answer is no. Continue to talk with them, ask pressing questions, but also understand is there any permanence with regard to that? At this stage, no. This is all still being planned. It's being looked at, and it could be subject to change. And you want to know at every time you talk to an agent with a company representing AEP Power Transmission, what is the status at this particular point? Another associated project is the West Licking County Area Improvements. That is also a complementary project in Western Licking County, just south and east of you, which is also part of this process. There's also the AEP Lot Transmission Line project that I'm helping a lot of your friends and neighbors along the Knox, Delaware County line and in Porter Township understand the issue. And yes, the Lot Transmission Line has been registered, has been filed as an official case with the Ohio Power Siting Board, and its docket card is readily accessible. Being able to understand, being able to take a look at status, being able to take a look at where information and materials, either on the AEP Power Transmission website, as well as with the Ohio Power Siting Board, is critically important at this particular case. Once cases are officially docketed, interested members of the public may view documents and receive free case updates from the PUCO's docket information system. I can show folks very easily, free of charge, you can go onto the OPSB website. Once you have the docket number, go to the docket information system, create your own account free of charge, subscribe, and anytime that anything is entered in that case, which might be the application itself, any of the studies that are part of the application, any comments from local community stakeholders, they are all matters of public record, and you have the ability to see them, stay up to the date with regard to issues, download them for your own personal use, or monitor things as they go on and have access to the docket card and all case records. There's also some other power siting history which might impact you as this case proceeds. The Ohio Supreme Court had a ruling on a case in Washington County just early here in 2023. And it upheld a landowner's group's rights to appeal to be completed before further action was done in the case. A lot of people were saying, you know, we have an issue, a need, a concern. Could eminent domain be applied? The answer is yes. That is a court proceeding in a court of law of the common pleas here in the state of Ohio. It's outside of the jurisdiction of the Ohio Power Siting Board. But some folks were concerned about that because there would be a case proceeding going on outside in the local courts, and nothing was settled yet with regard to the settlement offer and other things having to do with the easements that folks were considered. The Ohio Supreme Court said, you're right. A case cannot proceed until certain prerequisite requirements are settled and dealt with and readily identified in case proceedings with the Power Siting Board. Consequently, when it comes to eminent domain, they're not allowed to practice eminent domain, do seizure of property, or pay settlements until after the court and after the Power Siting Board sees, settles, and approves certain steps. Also, the Ohio General Assembly is taking a look right now at House Bill 64. It's modifying the eminent domain law. This is not law yet. However, it basically voids, it's being considered about avoiding appropriations that do not follow statutory procedures. There's a very detailed step-by-step process from beginning to end using eminent domain provisions that has to be followed to the letter. Consequently, there have been some times in court proceedings where that particular step-by-step process was not followed the way it needed to be. They made it very, very clear that if this is the procedure and the process, it has to be followed to the letter. And property owners who allege property has been appropriated outside of that procedure can sue for what's called inverse condemnation, which means you need to stop the proceeding. I want my money back. This is not right. And they can also have their attorney and court costs awarded in those proceedings. That's being considered by the Ohio General Assembly. Mr. Kick, who is also a state representative just north of you in Knox County and Ashland County, is one of the authors of the bill. And we can get more information to you with regard to that. But those are things that other folks in the legal community, other folks in the legislative community are looking at when it comes to power siting and transmission line work. I also want you to think about this. A lot of people are concerned right now. They're all being given basically an offer. A number of your folks in the township have had representatives or field agents from AEP come to their house and say, look, here's our document. here's our settlement. Here's basically what we're talking about, and are focusing on cash settlements and things and asking folks to take a look at, consider, and sign. There's a number of things that need to be negotiated in great detail in an easement agreement. I'm telling folks this, you need to think beyond the cash settlement. You need to think of that easement as a work order too. How is your ground? How is your land going to be treated? What other additional fees, programs, and concerns need to be addressed? If you're talking about long-term and different things, and AEP is going to be doing maintenance on the property, where are the ingress and egress points? How are you to be notified what's going on in different things? All through this process forever and a day. That's also detailed in an easement agreement. We tell folks before you consider signing one, you need to take a look at to make sure that all the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, and local utility interconnection procedures are in place. Where do you find out that information material? Working with the Power Siting Board, the PUCO, learning more about the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the permit procedures would be very handy for you. All construction permits with ODNR, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Ohio and U.S. EPA, and the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service are part of this process with the Power Siting Board. There are a number of permits having to do with soil, water, erosion control, stream bank protection, wetlands, ingress, egress points, county engineer, road use maintenance agreements are all part of this process. Have they all been settled, and are they part of that? You want to know, and you want to ask those questions also. Construction times, dust control, noise control procedures. When are they going to do construction? If construction is going to commence, what are the hours? What do you do when you have issues, complaints, concerns? Road use maintenance agreements with your township trustees and county engineer. What roads can be used for traffic control? What should the weight limits be? Where can trucks go through? Traffic management plans. Permit exploration and extension procedures all come into play and are all things that your planning commission, your township trustees, and county commissioners also want to have as part of this process. Much of the communication done right now is being done with field agents. There's nothing wrong talking with a field agent. As a matter of fact, field agents is a long established profession. Field agents or land agents have been employed by many energy service providers in oil and gas, pipelines, and yes, electric transmission. It's an honorable profession with over 100 years service in Ohio. However, as you're asking pressing questions about the status of this particular project, and a field agent cannot answer them for you, you always have the right to say and demand and ask for and get a vested representative directly employed by AEP Transmission to answer your questions and your concerns. And that field agent needs to get that person for you. You want to ask, what is eminent domain and when does it apply? Many people are finding out eminent domain could give an energy service provider the right of access to go across the property. However, your settlement offer, how your land is treated, ingress, egress points, what fees and different things need to be assessed in the future, what your relationship will be with the company in the future are all highly negotiable and are not under eminent domain. The need for you to understand and appreciate your rights and responsibilities along those lines are absolutely huge. Enlisting help, getting experienced legal counsel and land improvement contractors and consultants for regard to repair and remediation and possible scenarios is huge too. The Ohio Farm Bureau, we have an attorney referral network, and there in Harlem Township, there are 12 law firms across the state who've been with us for over 20 years. 3 are within a 20-minute drive of you. I can get you a copy of that listing. They've all basically been interviewed and evaluated by Farm Bureau, referred to us by our members who have used them well. And yes, we've dropped a couple of them because of non-performance or they went over to the dark side of the force. We can make that list available to you. Also tell you some pressing questions you need to ask which one. And we work with a number of folks in regard to that. You will not find that on our website. That comes from a very specific request from a member or a local government, and we give that list to you. But I'm going to tell you this. Going without an attorney on one of these is tough. I tell you, ignorance is bliss, but not doing these particular things can be incredibly expensive. The need for legal counsel to advocate your position is absolutely huge. And for every dollar that you spend in legal counsel now, negotiating a position is probably going to save you $35 in litigation in as little as 18 to 24 months. Things to think about. Lawyers are expensive. Going without them is even worse. Addressing issues beyond the settlement offer, the lump sum payment. As I said, landowners need to take a look at and incorporate work order issues, specifically into each easement agreement. There's no such thing as a group easement. There might be a number of people along the right of way, but each person is entitled and receives a separate easement. An easement is never a group document. It is a very specific document between one landowner and the energy service provider. As you're negotiating things that are taking a look at your piece of property, and your piece of property is probably as unique as a fingerprint. You've made it that way, and you have the right and the responsibility to negotiate a number of key codicils, amendments, points in that easement agreement which reflect that. If a field agent basically says, oh no, we're not doing that, we're not giving that to anybody else, 2 words to remember in that discussion: meeting over. You need to be able to do that because you have the right and the responsibility to do so. Ingress and egress locations. Where can they enter? Where do they need to exit your property during construction, as well as maintenance in years to come? Protections. Each property has certain soil characteristics, water management needs, subsurface drainage and tiling infrastructure, conservation practices. Other conservation easements could be there. Fencing, setbacks from property lines, farm equipment access during and post-construction. Your personal labor. If you have to do something and you have to rent someone else's piece of ground to accommodate your need, how much is that going to cost you? Transportation, money, time, and effort. If you're doing animal husbandry, because you have a lot of folks with horse farms up there and they need to be moved to another location, feed purchasing, all those can also be negotiated into an easement agreement and be compensated for. Special equipment, supplying and purchasing or rental payments, legal counsel costs. Everything is up for negotiation in a settlement offer in an easement agreement. Think of it more basically as a work order than anything else. Deeming when repair and remediation is complete is going to be huge. You should have the right to say in 36 to 48 months after construction is done, if everything is back to normal, that decision is yours and not the company's. The company still has the responsibility to make things right, adjustments and repairs during that period. You should have the power to deem when it is complete and repairs are totally done, not the company. That's about it. We've been going through there without a scorecard and things. That's been about 25 minutes or so. that's what's going on there. I know also talking with a number of your leaders, you were talking about possibly doing a larger community meeting, either virtual or in person, where I can go into more detail on each of those points. But right now, you have a pretty good idea about what are some things that local government officials, planning officials, local citizens need to consider when you're taking a look at an energy development project with regard to transmission lines. I thank you very much for your time. And are there any questions?
Okay, well, Dale, first of all, thank you very much. I'm just gonna move our participant list for the Zoomers here so we can see that. While I'm doing that, for those of you out there in Zoom land, you've probably seen my chat messages asking for your last names. If, for example, if it just came up KW on there, we'd really like you to chat back in response to that, your full name, just so we have a record of participation for this evening. I think probably what we might do here is just alternate questions from the room and then questions coming in on Zoom to make this manageable. Do we have questions in the room? All right, please come up to the podium here. Well, no, it doesn't bite. It doesn't bite.
Heart starts racing.
Because otherwise Dale won't be able to hear you and have it captured. So right, there you go.
Hi, my name is Tim Raymond. Thank you, Dale. I just have one overarching type of question. We're in mid-September now, and you gave a great overview of where this stands overall. What is the projected timeline for this to actually, from your knowledge, occur? That they'll actually get approval and say this is what it's going to be?
Yeah, great question. I would say this, that would be the first pressing question I would ask any field agent or representative from AEP. But I'm telling you this, even if you take a look at their website, and on their website is a timeline or a time frame, you're talking right now that they're still doing a lot of technical evaluations and things, as well as easement negotiations and asking people to sign options and stuff now. Do you need to sign anything? The answer is you don't know what the routes are that are going to be detailed in the application. So not to worry about that. And I would say this, from the point where they file with the Ohio Power Siting Board in pre-filing and then submit their application, there are very specific periods of time that have to be followed. And from the time that they start that process with the Power Siting Board to the end could be 48 months or 4 years down the line. So you have some time to consider things. You might be given the impression that things are imminent. For some of those folks in the energy service factor, it could be imminent because they want to get things done and filed. However, please take your time, and consequently, you still have a readily active time frame with regard to evaluation of the permit, local open house and public meetings, comment and evaluation period, judicial process going forward that you need to take a look at. And that's a good 36 to 48 months from when they file. So you have time to consider a number of things. I hope that helps you.
Thank you.
Okay, while the brave get ready to come up for the next question in the room, I'm going to ask one that came in on chat. And so this is from Jen. How do we find out if our property will be affected? If we've not heard from anyone, are we in the clear?
Well, I would say this right now, the company, and this is not AEP, Columbus and Southern Ohio Electric or Ohio Power. You're talking about AEP Transmission was a separate company unto itself. They have a number of folks who are doing technical surveys, line of sight and environmental surveys. I've seen maps that look like a spider's web, where they could have at some of their local meetings here during the early part of the summer and spring, they were up to 18 different possible routes. I've also seen some maps where they're down to 5 or 6. When it comes time basically to go and file with the Ohio Power Siting Board, the Ohio Administrative Code says you need to have two distinct routes, Route A, Route B. You need to do the technical evaluations for each route, Route A and Route B. And the company is allowed to say which one they prefer, but the Ohio Power Siting Board will make the ultimate decision which route will be selected. Unless you're along Route A and Route B, unless you've been notified and asked by AEP Power Transmission to do a preliminary environmental line of sight walkthrough survey across your property, you might not be involved in this particular project whatsoever. However, remember this, nothing has been filed yet and plans can change. Stay tuned for further developments.
Okay, come on up. Hey, come on up to the mic, if you will, please. Just give us your first and last name, just so we know who's asking the question.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Hooper, and I was feeling kind of good about this until your last statement, since the guys have been out to my property doing line of sight and all that good stuff. My initial question was, who should I be talking to get the real story? What I mean by that is probably a number of others in the room too are getting a very different story from AEP. Being told it is imminent, it is coming down your property. Here is the contract, and we're going to start construction in 2024. I mean, it's right on the timeline. What you're telling me is reassuring to the fact that there's a lot of steps that we need to go through before we get there, and it could be 4 years out. So we're distrusting of AEP right now. Who do we go to? Is it somebody local that we can find out exactly where we are in these steps prior to them filing the application? I understand once they file the application, it's public, but prior to that, it's kind of gray.
You're very good question, because I'm going to tell you this. This is where it's sketchy right now. If you go to, and I had it listed in my on my cards here on my slide deck, if you go to the AEP website, do you see a lot of information there? In some cases, yes, some cases, no. You have a very nice video where they're telling you about this project. If you will take a look at their website where this project is detailed, you will find on the front page down in the lower left the name and direct phone number of an AEP representative who has the responsibility for public outreach. It's a woman's name. I can't remember the name at this particular point, but I would go on there, get her name and her number, and I would start asking pressing questions from her, because that is her responsibility. And again, I would also say this. You're correct. The company has sent out subcontractors who are doing preliminary environmental surveys across property, line of sight surveys. A lot of landowners there said, should we allow them on our property? Under both state and federal law, if your piece of property is being considered for an energy transmission project, the company has the right of access for one line of sight environmental survey. Those folks are being notified. Many of them are asked to sign a 2-page licensure or a permit agreement, which literally says that when you sign this, if we come across your property and damage any of your property, you send us the bill, we pay it, no questions asked. Also, if we injure ourselves crossing a fence, putting our leg down a groundhog hole, being on the wrong side of the fence with the bull or the horse, and we're injured, that's our responsibility. You also have the right to have your legal counsel take a look at that permit slip too and make some additions and corrections. You also have the right to be with them. If they're coming to talk to you, urge them to schedule their time to do that survey when you or a representative of your family can be there. Get their business cards, name, address, phone, who you've talked to, and show them everything on your property: highly erodible soils, stream banks, the old Civil War encampment, the potential Indian burial mound, a grave or something of historical significance. The only time a company actually discovers something which might have them address the need to move that is when they do that particular survey. I would also say this, the only thing I would say is you need to create a file, you need to create a notebook. Very similar to what I have here. Have it basically, don't do it spiral bound, have it so basically if a page is ripped out, you can see that. Anytime you're contacted, name, address, phone number for that particular person. What was the gist of the conversation? You don't have to write down everything word for word, but if someone talks to you, communicates with you by phone or in person or by mail, save that, because that file is going to help you when you want to do public comment or participate in local public hearings. If you're treated well, an administrative law judge wants to know that. If you are still given concerns, issues that need to be addressed, pressing questions that were ignored, they want to know that too. Copious notes are absolutely huge. And I also need to tell you this, these guys drive shiny white pickups. When they go back to their pickup, they don't always leave the driveway immediately. Why? Because they also have their field notebooks. It could be a laptop computer and they're writing down their entries of who they talked to that day. Or it could be a book just like this. They're keeping copious notes, and copious notes can be called upon as evidence in hearing. I know because it's happened to me several times. Keep a notebook, keep information, ask those particular questions, and put down in that notebook what answers you have been given. I hope that helps you there too. It's kind of a long drawn out process, but at this point, recording communication is very important.
Okay, Dale, we'll see if there are folks on Zoom that someone wants to unmute and ask a question. We will take a question from Zoom. But remember, you have to unmute. Hello, Zoom. That's okay.
Hey, Steve, it's Bruce.
Yeah, hi, Bruce. Go ahead.
Hey, what Dale just mentioned, the project outreach specialist for the project is Brian Recker. That's who's listed on their website. And if you find it exactly where Dale said it would be on the website, it does have their phone number, or his phone number, which is 614-259-8201.
Yes. I stand corrected. You'll have to excuse me because besides working with the folks in your community, I'm working with several others in several different areas of the state. And the last one with AEP was there's a very nice woman working with your friends and neighbors in Scioto and Lawrence County. And that was the last thing that popped into my head. But no, I am so glad that you found that and you told the people that person's number. He's directly responsible for helping you get the answers to your questions.
Come on up. We have another question in the room here. Just give a second here for them to make their way to the podium. Watch the board. Yeah. Dale.
Hi, Dale. My name's Joe Vinciguerra. Thanks for your time this evening. We appreciate it. Outside of voicing our opposition as individuals and groups to this project coming through Harlem Township, and waiting for the final transmission routes to be posted and potential eminent domain, et cetera, what can we do as landowners right now to stop this from taking place if we are opposed to it, which I know many of us are at this point?
Okay. I'd say this, you're going to have a very effective strategy that shows why, because I will tell you this, you're going to need to you're going to need to prove your particular position, because take a look, I've given you the 6 or 7 different prerequisite requirements the Power Siting Board through the Ohio Administrative Code has to consider with regard to yes or no. I would pick and choose those ones that best interest you or you have knowledge, skill, and expertise on. I would do research with regard to that, And yes, are there legal counsel out there that you can talk to that can help you create your position and get you involved in advocacy in this process? The answer is yes. And please send me an email and I can send you that list also. At this particular time, doing that type of research, working with legal counsel, have experience advocating for people with your particular position in power siting proceedings, and preparing that strategy and possible point for advocacy going forward. You have time to do that research now. Okay, I hope I helped you some there.
Thank you.
Okay. Back to the Zoomers. Anybody out there have a question?
Yes,
Who is this? Scott?
Scott Buell.
Hi, Scott, go ahead.
Yes, a very informative presentation. Thank you very much on that. AEP has already sent out questionnaires and requests for signing and agreeing to the easements. But if nothing is official until it's filed with the and gets a docket number, what's the legal status if somebody signs something now? Is that still able to be tossed out once they get an official quote A and B route?
That's a very good question. One, basically, that you probably want to address with regard to legal counsel, because right now, you know, they're talking to you and they're talking to folks about signing easements and making it sound imminent. You need to do this. It's not imminent. You have time to take a look at, you have time to examine, you have time to ask questions and do research with regard to time frame. Some of you are even asked basically to sign options going forward. I would say this, please talk to the attorneys on our list. Many of them have told folks that until there is a definite case, until you know definite routes to be considered, is there anything definite basically in those particular legal documents? The answer probably is maybe, maybe not. You want to be able to reference all of your negotiations and points to something that is concrete, that is seeable, that is a matter of public record. How much of this is concrete? How much of it is seeable? How much of it is a public record at this particular point? Very little. And so please take your time. Please work with your legal counsel. If you're being asked to take a look at things and sign today, that's their particular schedule. That does not have to be yours. Okay? I hope I helped you some there.
Hi, Dale. My name is Molly Snodgrass. I have a question. In your experience, or are you aware of any cases that have been filed with the Power Siting Board that ultimately were rejected by the Power Siting Board for different reasons? Like, is there an example of a successful where, you know, a company such as AEP intended to build a power line route, identified the different ones, went through this whole process, but ultimately that project did not happen?
Well, I can tell you this, it's interesting with regard to that question. I have not seen one rejected over the last 10 to 15 years, but I have seen some cases withdrawn before you get to that particular point because of the data, because of the questions being asked or raised, being also asked to generate additional information, data, material as part of the application. That's all part of this particular process. I have seen some casework in my 30 plus years that where I haven't seen a rejection, but I've seen several withdrawn because they didn't have the data and different things. They said they would resubmit, but never did. That's always part of the process too. I hope I helped you some there.
Bill, this is Steve Eisenbrough. I mean, my assumption is that you might not stop it, but good public input helps make it the most acceptable to the local community. And that's what we're trying to do, is figure out how to get a voice and a platform to have that discussion. I guess primarily with the siting board, so that we can talk about, what we believe are the best possible options on routing, so that they're not driving a line right across and subdividing somebody's property. So that is one of the biggest concerns. So it's probably not happening, but modification is our game here, I believe.
That's very nice to know, and that is a very viable strategy. And again, I would say this: you want to have legal counsel involved and enlisted. You want to have your strategy worked out in research. When given the opportunity at the table as a party of record and doing stipulations and agreements going forward and advocating that position is going to be absolutely huge. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put him on the spot, but I saw Ed Yeager here. He's also a representative, or he's also a member of your township. And I worked with him under similar circumstances with Harvey Solar over in Hartford Township in Licking County. Helped him obtain legal counsel and do what you have just said. Create basically a strategy for advocacy, take a look at a number of predetermining factors, and negotiating through legal counsel to have things done for his property to accommodate him. Ed, I see you're here with me and you turned off your mute. I hope I am correct with regard to what I've just said.
You are correct, Dale. The only thing you forgot to say is like pushing a rope uphill, if you will, but you can get up to the top of the mountain, if you will, and amen to everything that you said. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it too, because I tell you, that's also a viable strategy also. Like you say, I've seen transmission line cases where the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. The company might like to have a straight line because it's very cost effective. But you're saying this too, when you're taking a look at the needs of this community, when you're taking a look at the pieces of land and parcel it's going across, when you're taking a look at topography, when you're taking a look at aesthetics and layout, there's a number of key determining factors that are saying, if you're going to do this here, that straight line is not going to work. We advocate, if you need to have that project go through here, this is the way it needs to be done. And here's our information and materials and our evidence to back that up. That's a very viable strategy too. And I tell you, I worked with Ed and a number of folks on Harvey Solar with a very good legal counsel just to be able to do that. It can be done, but it's going to take work. And as Ed said, it's like climbing a mountain at times, but Ed's seeing some of the benefits of it now. That's something you need to take a look at too.
Dale, we have another question here in the room.
Sure.
My name's Dean Miller. I'm the other Dean Miller, so I know the Hoovers are here. I'm kind of speaking on my own behalf. Some of us have farmland that's in the area. And I don't think it's any new news to any of us that have the farmland that our farms are worth quite a bit more than what the agriculture is that's coming off of it. I mean, I'll go as far as to say that I'm very clear at the fact that my farm, and I'm not speaking for Gary over here who sits next to me and has farmland next to me, but our farms are probably going to be developed over the next few years. And so some of us have gotten option letters from our friends at AAP. It's a long story here, but the options seem to only cover just the land that the easement, that the utility line is coming across. And sure in hell, from my standpoint, looks like it's going to destroy a good 70, 80 acres of one of my parcels, even though they only want to do 6 or 7 acres. So how does this roll down the road when you say no to the option, number one? And then number two is, how is it that they're allowed on your land when they never even notify you? And they've been out on your land twice, and you've got game cameras that show that they've been out on your land twice.
Well, a couple of things. If you find them on your land without permission, it's time to call the sheriff. They are trespassing. They have to have direct permission basically from you to do that. Number one. Don't shoot them. Number two, also too, you need,
you can shoot them.
you know, I have actually said this.
On our property twice now, and Gary, have they asked you?
No.
They have not asked me, and I've got photos to show it too.
If they have not asked you, if they have not sought permission, if they do not have permission from you with regard to that, they need to be escorted off. They need to formally ask, and you need to formally give them permission to do that particular survey.
Okay.
I've also done this before. This happened in Scioto County. A guy came home, and in his pasture in front of his house was a set of stakes punched into the ground. And he says, what in the Sam Hill was that all about? Well, a guy from a survey company contracted by the local utility on a transmission project was there and said, this is where we want to go. And he called me because he thought it was imminent. And I said, well, you know, that's what he said to you. It's not necessarily totally accurate because you didn't ask a number of questions, but that's where they want to go. Is that, but did they have permission to go there? The answer was no. And he also asked me, he says, what do I do about those stakes basically all installed onto my my pasture? I said, you raise tomatoes? He said, yes. He said, you just got your stakes for the tomatoes in the garden. Pull them up. There is a certain process they have to follow to be able to do that. They have to seek permission. They have to be able to tell you with regard to that. Also, too, and again, I did the same. I had a very similar question from Ed a few years ago with another power generation project. There are a number of things that you want to have addressed. There's a number of things that you want to have negotiated. There's a number of things you want to call attention to with the Ohio Power Siting Board about this particular impact. There's a number of things that, when it comes down to it, AEP is probably going to want to negotiate with you as part of this particular process. Continue that advocacy, continue that particular strategy. You have that issue of concern as an individual landowner. And if I understand correctly from a number of folks who are local government officials, they have very similar interests, needs, and concerns too.
Thank you.
Please take a look at that. And I will tell you this, my friend, I'm not an attorney. That's why we have an attorney referral network. Make sure that you contact me so I can send that to you. And I can probably tell you 2 or 3 attorneys that you might want to sit down with to talk about that strategy because they have that experience working with folks to do that. Okay?
Okay. Scott, do you have another question?
Yes, I do. Harlem Township is currently working on a number of overlay districts that will incorporate zoning requirements for industrial development as such. Many of those have setback areas on the road frontage. Is there an example where AEP has worked with local zoning to incorporate setback areas and things like that so that they're not tying up more land in footage?
That's something you want to actively discuss with them. I would say this, one thing you need to understand and appreciate is that when it comes to power siting authority, you're working with zoning authority with regard to those overlay districts. Are power transmission facilities under that jurisdiction? The answer is no. However, having to negotiate a number of particular things, having to advocate in front of the Power Siting Board, the reason why with regard to that is a very viable strategy and something that needs to be discussed and something that can be put in the stipulation and order and agreement going forward. I feel this, AEP is going to be very interested in working with you to accommodate a number of issues, needs, and concerns, because if not, there's litigation, there's process of appeal, and the appeal process in this particular proceedings after a motion for rehearing is done in different things, and you do not like basically the decision made in the focus of rehearing or appeal, it goes directly to the Ohio Supreme Court, which could take another 18 to 24 months. AEP understands the need to do a number of these particular things. They understand the need to accommodate and work with local communities long-term. And that's all part of this particular process and part of the stipulations and different things going forward. Actively pursue that, actively negotiate, actively advocate in front of the Power Siting Board those issues and concerns. Okay?
Okay, we're gonna take, I think, probably 2 more questions unless I get bull rushed here, that we have a stampede of more coming up, but we have another one here in the room. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Deborah Walsh. We all appreciate very much you spending time with us this evening. I have 2 quick questions. Part of what our issues here is a lot of us feel as if we don't know what we don't know. I live on a 5-acre residential property at the very southeastern corner of Harlem Township. There were AEP agents on our property. They said they were trying to find the property lines. I received no notice that they were there, but they were on the western edge of our property where the lines were not intended to or shown to be going. Should I ask Mr. Recker, what the heck were they doing there looking for our property line when they told me that that's not where the lines were going? I mean, that just sets off all kinds of warning bells. My other quick question is, does the Ohio Power Siting Board or any other Ohio statute allow for some kind of remuneration over the fact that if the lines go down the one projected route of South County Line Road, close to where our northern property edge is, then it will cross County Line Road and proceed on south in the Licking County portion of the road? Is there any remuneration for the inherent loss of value of our residential property by having towers right at our property line, very close to the house?
Good questions. I would say this. Yes, I would make and express my concern about these guys being on your property or wanting to find the property line. Could the adjoining property be part of this particular process? You need to have an answer to that. And I would recommend, yes, you call the public outreach specialist that we talked about here and have him get the answers to you. Why were they on your property?
I want everything in writing.
Pardon? I'm sorry.
I always email. I want everything in writing.
That's fine also, but I would do an email. I would do both, phone and email, with regard to that. Phone to make sure he understands what you want to talk about. You can immediately talk with him and tell him you want it in writing, you want it in email. Also, too, as part of these processes, the company does have to do a report. One of the reports it does on the social economic trend is it has to show the potential impact to real estate and property, having this particular line going across. Those are done independently. They are a matter basically of record. They are part of the application. You can read those once they are there. Can you refute the findings of that particular study? Could you present your own as a party of record? The answer is yes with regard to all of those, and that's all part of the process, discussion, and argument going forward. Okay?
Ohio Siting Board would listen to residential concerns as far as choosing which route, if we feel the economic impact on the value of our property is significant.
Yes, but I'm also going to tell you this. While AEP has to prove its position along those prerequisite requirements for power siting, you also need to prove your position also. Concrete evidence, science-based,
right,
detailed with regard to that. You have to follow the same requirements they do with regard to that. And you have the right as a party of record, if you're going to refute their findings, the first thing that's going to be asked you is, okay, prove your position. And you're going to have information, details, and studies that show that also. So they can both be examined and both be determined as part of this process.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, is there a bull rush in here to ask more questions?
I just have one more quick.
Come on. Come on. And I think we probably given the interest, realize that this won't be the last time we're doing this, but step on.
No, I understand in talking when working with you guys, this was a prerequisite or this was a preview. If you do want to have an exercise doing another local community meeting and have me coming up personally, I've given some guys basically some dates that I'm available, and please work with the Delaware County Farm Bureau and their public policy action team. And there's a couple of members I'm seeing here who are also members of the Farm Bureau too. They can help facilitate that as part of the process. But please, what's the next question?
Yes, just a quick question. You've advocated for legal representation. My question is, in your experience, is it better to go at AEP with individual representation, multiple attorneys, or to group together with single representation as a larger entity? Which has more success in moving them the direction we want, individually or in larger groups?
I can say this, what I've seen before in power siting cases that I've worked on. The vast majority of community stakeholders, such as yourself, have come together and have united under one legal counsel. Number one, that's helped with regard to cost. It's helped with regard to research. It helps with regard to advocacy. And so even though you're all individuals, being a group together and having that person or having that legal counsel represent or advocate for that group is a very viable option and is a very common practice in power siting board proceedings. That might be something you want to pursue because it would help you where you can share resources with the attorney and more efficiently do a number of things with regard to filings. And so, and that's a very nice question to ask. You know, I tell you this, when people ask me to recommend an attorney, I don't recommend one, I recommend 4 or 5 at once, because you have the right to shop, you have the right to ask questions, you have the right to find a person that best fulfills your particular needs that you're comfortable with. And if you have more friends and neighbors who also want to have that person do that, there's nothing wrong with that either. And so being able basically to have attorney work for a number of community stakeholders and represent a number of them is a very viable option and is a very common practice in front of the power siting board.
Okay, we have another question.
My name is Tammy Cotty, and the question I have is a number of landowners have received options already. And some of us have received options for both lines because our properties are impacted by both lines. How do we know and how do we find out whether other lines are being considered? Because these are the only ones that we've been shown. It would be good to know how far along other lines or other options might be.
I would say this, you want to work with your legal counsel with regard to that. And I would say this, please express your concerns to AEP representatives. You're being asked to sign an option to what? Because until they file and you readily see that particular line on a map in the application, does it exist? And do you need to sign an option now with regard to that? I have questions and concerns with regard to that. Are you signing something on something which might potentially not exist? I also have some other concerns. Because as I said, you are going to be seeing a number of pieces of energy related infrastructure being incorporated over the next several years in Harlem Township. Transmission lines, energy storage, power generation facilities, a number of things. Could signing an option today or a lease today, could you find in the fine print that if it's not being used for one type of project, can it be held and used for another type of project? That's a very valid concern because one of the first critical steps is that these easements and different things are recorded at the county recorder's office. They become part of your deed and part of your property. They become part of a record. an affidavit of forfeiture and abandonment is going to be needed in a legal proceeding to have them removed. Pressing questions is that, if I sign this now, what are the cancellation features if this is not the route being used? And how am I assured that this particular lease is not going to be used in some way, shape, or form with some other energy development project? Those are very valid concerns and very pressing questions you need to ask. And until they're able to give you those particular answers and record those answers in writing, I'd wait just a little bit till I see exactly where the lines are going to be. And again, as I said before, I'm not an attorney, but please, we do have a list. We have several who are in the network. That's a very good question to ask an attorney as you're looking through this process. Good question.
Okay, well, I think we're gonna bring it to a close, recognizing that we're not done with this topic.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Hey, it's Bruce, and I'm part of the strategic planning committee, and certainly on infrastructure, trying to help with all this. I just wanted to ask kind of one final thing as we wrap up, and as I've listened via Zoom, it certainly appears there are varying degrees of the contractors for AEP that are applying different levels of pressure across the township currently. And I know we've talked about, looking at opportunities to do subsequent meetings so we can educate more of the township on what their options are. But I just wanted to at least make a judgment that says to me, there's nothing that appears to me to be a good idea to sign things away as there are all these questions to be asked as pressure's happening. So I just hope what everybody is walking away with is that there is a process involved, and unless you really want to, give up your easement or submit to an easement or an option, it doesn't appear to me that it's as imminent as what the AEP contractors may be trying to say out in the township. So I don't want to dance around it. It just seems to me that, that's kind of the case and where we are today.
Good point, Bruce. I think that's right. So it's kind of keep your powder dry right now, and let's see how this thing proceeds.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Dale's email was on the front page of the PowerPoint, but if you want, I will read it out here for a second. So it's D as in dog, Arnold, ARNOLD at 4 initials, O F B as in boy, F as in Frank again, .org. And so that's the email for Dale.
Read that off again.
Sure, I'll do it again. It is D Arnold altogether at OFBF.org.
Yes.
Okay.
And OFBF is Ohio Farm Bureau Federation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you could say this is the easiest thing. Darn old. That's me. At OFBF, Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, OFBF.org. Okay.
Hey, and Steve, I did find Brian Recker with AEP, his actual email. I believe someone asked a question and said that instead of calling, they would like to email as well. Would everybody like to have that?
I think, yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
It starts with capital O outreach. So outreach at AEPOhiotransmission.com. Outreach at AEPOhiotransmission.com.
Yes. Because I'll tell you this, please rest assured and understand this. You are working with AEP Transmission. That is a separate company than Columbus and Southern Ohio or Ohio Power, which are your local distribution companies. They're all owned by AEP, but the company that's doing the transmission project, the company you'll be working with is AEP Transmission. Okay? which means if you call the local power company or whatever and ask questions, they're not going to be able to help you whatsoever because this is not within their jurisdiction or within their bailiwick.
All right, well, thank everyone. We have about 29 Zoomers out there, and thanks for joining in, plus a room full here of at least that many. And we'll keep the discussion going. You're welcome to come to any of the Strategic Planning Committee meetings where we're working on this and lots of other topics in the township. We meet the first and third Tuesday of every month at 6:30 in this room. And so please feel free to join in to kind of stay in touch. Other thing is, if you're not on our email distribution, first of all, how many people in this room heard about the meeting tonight from an email that you received? I'll see, it's working. We're getting there. But if you're not on our email list, Molly would be thrilled to get your email tonight, and we will add it to the list as we kind of build that out, because it's the most effective way we can get timely information out to people. And also, if you didn't sign in, please sign in. We won't come knocking on your door. We're just trying to keep track of the amount of participation. So, okay, Zoomers, we're going to shut it down here. Thank you. And again, set your last name in with your ID on Zoom. It's not too late. I'll leave this open for a couple of minutes for you to be able to send a chat message back to us. Thank you. I'm going to mute the mic now, so the meeting here in the room is now basically closed.
Okay. Bye, everybody. See you again soon.
Very much. Thank you, Dale.
Bye-bye.